Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Catholic ReCon, testimonies from reverts and converts. I'm your host, Eddie Trask, and this week's guest is an author, a blogger, and solo traveler. It's Denise Mercado, and you got to check out her website. I was actually quite fascinated by her website. Very well done in the blog section specifically. DeniseMercado.com. And also, I know we'll get into this later, but she just released a book. It's on Amazon, Mary's Life Journey and Her Amazing Yes. So I invite you to visit Amazon and pick up a copy of that. And Denise, first of all, thank you. Thank you for being here. And thank you for your witness of even writing. That's tremendous. What a gift.
It is a gift. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
What I wanted to mention is, didn't I see this on your site for a while? I don't know where you are now, but you were ranking for the Marian. There's a category, right, on Amazon related to Mariology, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, and we ranked #1 for about a couple of weeks.
That's
Yeah,
excellent.
a couple of weeks, which was really nice. So
That's
we were
nice.
good.
Well, great. Well, for those that have not come across your site and those have not come across anything that you've worked on, why don't you go back in time and let us know how the journey began for you?
Okay, the journey with the book. Okay.
Well, no,
First,
the journey with the book, as well as the journey in general with your Catholic faith.
oh yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was born and raised, I'm a cradle Catholic, born Catholic, and very strong in my faith. And then I became a teenager, and that changed things. And I got tired. My faith became obligation, and I got tired of all that. And I realized all the rules were there. That's all I saw. So I left. And my husband was also raised Catholic, and he left too. So we were kind of floundering out there. But what brought us back was our youngest son, Danny, had meningitis when he was 6 months old, and that left him with severe disabilities. And at that point, we realized we were headed in the wrong direction. We needed to turn around. And we went back to our faith, but not to Catholicism. We went back to Christianity and went back into the Protestant world, not even realizing what we were doing. And amazingly enough, we learned so much. It was a resting place that I knew God allowed us to be in. But when all was said and done, there was something missing, and we couldn't figure out what it was until finally one day we looked at each other and we thought, it's the Eucharist. We miss the Eucharist, and we miss the Blessed Mother, the Rosary. I mean, no one outside the Catholic Church really talks about the Blessed Mother. And so we came back, and I decided when I came back that I was not going to just be a person in the pew going through this Catholic aerobics of kneeling, sitting, and standing. I wanted to understand Catholicism, and I really wanted to join in and have a closer relationship with God. So I studied and I researched, and I read. I'm an avid reader, and I'm very particular about what I read. I read a lot of spiritual books, and most of them are Catholic. Some of them are not, but because I like to see both sides of issues. But one day in October 2019, I read Father Calloway's book on the Champions of the Rosary. So my mother said a rosary every day. My grandmother said a rosary every day. I received my first rosary at my first communion and carried it with me religiously, but that's all I did with it, was carry it. I never really did anything with it. So when I read this book, I was determined to find out more about it, and it was a phenomenal book. But when all was said and done, after I finished that, I thought about Mary a lot, and I thought, what made her say yes? And why did she say yes so quickly? She didn't even ask to think about it. And so I started digging and writing and digging and writing. And I'm retired. I didn't think I would be writing a book, but God has plans. God has a plan. So then quarantine came along, and I figured, well, as long as I don't lose the internet or electricity, I'm good. So I kept writing. And when all was said and done, I had an 84,000 word manuscript about the Rosary, about all the mysteries of the Rosary. And I knew I needed to get it out, but I got scared because I had no credentials, and I thought, oh, who are you to write this book? And so I gave it finally, after taking on and off the shelf, I gave it to my friend who happens to be a retired religious education director. And I said, will you read this? And she said, absolutely. And she read it. And we spent a couple of weeks going back and forth, um, taking some things out, putting some things in, and just tweaking it a little bit. And then I asked her if she thought it was worthy of publication. And she said, absolutely. So that took me down the road to publication. So that's like kind of my story in a nutshell, really.
Wow. So a few questions, several questions. Um, what type of Protestant church were you going to, and for how long? And what ages were both of you, you and your husband, when you were going to that church?
Okay, so my son was born in 1982, and he got sick in 1982. And we were in our 20s when all that happened, and we left. We kind of decided we were going to go back. We got introduced to non-denominational churches,
Got it.
and we figured, okay, that would be a safe place right in the middle. It wasn't a safe place. I mean, it was good for us.
No, I hear
We
you. I hear you. Yeah.
we had a really great church and some really great pastors. But again, I sat there and I thought, you guys are only going so far. You're having communion, but it's not really communion. What are you doing? And so that it took us 3 years to realize that. We were there for 3 years. And then we just said, we just need to go back home. We got homesick. We knew that we missed the Eucharist. We were tired of just living on the edge. We wanted to really be fully involved.
Now, do you
And
remember, because you said you kind of looked at each other and realized that you were missing the Eucharist. Do you remember how that played out? Do you remember that? Was it truly on the same day, or you both kind of, did you keep some of that to yourself? Like, what is, I feel like I
yeah,
have a yearning for something, but what the heck is it? Yeah.
well, it's interesting because I absolutely remember the day that I told my husband I wanted to go to this non-denominational church, and he said, we're Catholic, we don't belong there. So I remember that day very clearly, but we weren't practicing Catholic. So it was just kind of, but I kind of, as I was going to this other church, and then he joined me, and we were just, and our family came, our children came with us. We started learning things, and again, I started keeping these things to myself. And then one day I sat down with my husband and said, something's missing. I don't understand. He said, yeah, you know what's missing. And so we had this conversation, and we realized it. He realized it, I realized it, and we know we need to go back home.
Got it. So then when you talk about you don't want to just be in the pews, I think that speaks to many people that,
Yeah,
in your case, it sounds what I call it. It's a reversion. I was raised Catholic and ended up in
exactly.
a non-denominational church for 10 years and
Hmm.
returned. And when you come back, a lot of people, they don't just, okay, I'm back. There's a fire inside of them. So can
Yes,
you speak to
yes.
that a little bit and what that looks like?
Yes, I really was. I did not. I wanted to understand what the mass was all about, because really up until that point, all I knew was the aerobics part of the mass. Kneeling, sitting, standing, and not doing things on cue. So I was reading books that talked about the mass, and my favorite book that explained it was Dr. Scott Hahn and the Lamb's Supper. I mean, that opened my eyes completely, and I thought, okay, I get this now. So, I dug into that. I dug into the Eucharist. I dug into the Blessed Mother and the Rosary. I mean, just things that, um, that I knew in my first grade teacher in Catholic school taught me the Rosary, but I really didn't learn it until a few months ago. So, it took me 65 years to get there, but it's okay. I got there.
Yeah.
So,
And as it relates to the rosary, what I find interesting about the rosary is how long you can recite it. Well, this speaks to your aerobics comment, how long you can do an action and
right.
not understand why you're doing it, what you're supposed
Yeah.
to be doing. So then to those that don't understand Catholicism, that vain repetition objection
Yeah.
starts to seem, whoa, 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 am I just repeating for the sake of repeating? Am I kneeling for
Yeah.
the sake of kneeling? And did you find that reflecting on the mysteries and really training yourself to do that is what opened the doors, or how did it work for you?
Well, in Father Calloway's book, he has this chart of all different rosaries. And I right away grabbed that book and ran to my mom and said, "Did you know there were different kinds of rosaries?" And she was like, "What?" And so we both learned something. But we so I dug into I took all the rosaries, all the mysteries of the Franciscan rosary, the Bridgetine rosary, the Servite rosary, and the Dominican rosary, put them in chronological order, and then wrote a little bit about each of them. That's what's in my book. But
Wow.
as I wrote about them, I used the spiritual exercises from St. Ignatius on placing yourself in the mystery. I mean, that is just awesome. So I did that. I did some really researching. But what I found was so amazing was that there are an awful lot of Protestant theologians who say Catholic things, who agree with Catholic teachings. And I wonder, like, for example, Martin Luther agrees with the Immaculate Conception. He believes in the Immaculate Conception. So I wonder how many Protestants actually know that. And so that was another reason why, as I grabbed all this information, I thought this book is not just going to be for Catholics. It's for everybody. It's for everybody who really can be drawn to that picture on the cover. They should be able to open that book and really relate to it in some way, shape, or form, and be challenged to go deeper. That's the whole point.
I love it. I love it. And the Ignatian spirituality and the exercises, I tried that as well. And I started
Hmm.
with the agony in the garden.
Mm,
I couldn't even get through 3 minutes, and I just started
yeah,
bawling. And
yeah,
that's when I
yeah.
knew I was finally accessing a part of my heart that I had never accessed.
Right
I had never known how to place myself in a
in there.
scene, but you need that guide.
Hmm.
So first of all, 84,000 words. How long is the book?
The book is well, it's got 22 pages of footnotes. I got over 400 footnotes.
Oh my
So it's about 185 pages without the footnotes.
god. Okay, got it.
Okay. And so, but yeah, over 400 footnotes. I mean, I really dug. I was in quarantine. I had nothing to do but read and study.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
Do you come across now, years later, do you come across people, Catholics, raised Catholic, that had also done similar things to what you did as it relates to going to a non-denominational church, thinking it's not necessarily middle ground, but this seems inviting? I mean, that's one of the things that spoke to me. Okay, it's inviting. I don't even know what I believe. I mean, I was in my 20s and certainly didn't know my Catholic faith very well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So have you come across people like that? Because I always
Yeah.
find that very fascinating.
No, a lot of people that I know, and there's quite a few that I know that have left the Catholic Church, but they left angry because of things that happened in our church. And I'm sitting here thinking, so when something happens in the church you're going to now, are you going to run someplace else? I mean, it's just whenever you get a group of people together, people on this side of heaven will always disappoint you, even if they're wearing collars. And so, so you have to kind of look at what's the truth, not the people, but what's the truth. And then you work around those people and you move those people out of the way if you have to, but you don't leave it. But those are the people that I know that have left. They've left because they're angry at the church and they've
But
gone someplace else.
okay, with the people that you're thinking of, they are still going to a Christian church in
Yes,
most
they're going
cases?
to non-denominational Christian churches. Yes.
Got it. Yeah, we noticed that as well. I mean, at the time when I was in that church and I heard, oh, former Catholic here,
Yeah.
Former Catholic, and you hear that so much. And then I thought of myself, I don't even know that I thought former Catholic. I told someone, a pastor or elder, oh, I was, raised Catholic. And the common response is, oh, you and many, many others. And so
Right.
it speaks directly to the hemorrhaging that the church talks about.
Yes.
And when you really get down to, as they say in sales, what are the pain points? What were the pain points? And you're absolutely right. I've heard people say that a priest didn't show up for a visit that he was supposed to make. I'm out. a church member was expecting too much of that
Yep.
person when they were volunteering and they were asked to do just too much, and they were almost like taken advantage of, and they didn't speak up. Instead, they went to another church. And what I'm trying to say is what you said is happening on a regular basis, but logically, you would have to say, if someone disappoints you, what would keep you? What would keep you from leaving the
The
next
Eucharist, the
church?
Eucharist, yeah. What keeps you from leaving is the truth, the Eucharist, the Trinity, the Blessed Mother. I mean, that's what you're there for. You don't go to mass because it's a social club. That's
Correct.
not what we go there for. We go there for to worship God and to. So, do you need greeters at the door? Well, maybe you do, but maybe you
Sure.
don't. You know what I mean? So
Well,
so
and
it's a
I
different concept.
yeah, and I think that if more of us, and this is what we're all trying to do, if more of us know our faith, then those things start to matter less and less and less, and
Hmm.
you start to see the Holy Eucharist in a new way, and you
Right.
start to see the Holy Mass in a new way. But if you don't
Hmm.
understand the elements and you just see aerobics, well, it's going to be easy to be disappointed by someone next to you, or
Right.
someone in a group that you joined, a Bible study, and they said
Right.
something offensive, and you say, you know what, I'm out of here. So,
You
you
have
know,
to be committed and you have to be willing to dig deep and learn. I mean, if you like, it's like anything. If you want to take apart a car, you've got to read the manual. You got to dig into it and find out all the parts and figure it out. If you're not willing to do that, the car's not going to get made. That's all there is to it. And so that's pretty much the way I feel about faith. I mean, you can have an opinion, but it's not about opinions. It's about faith. It's about digging in and moving forward and reading and studying and learning and asking those hard questions, rolling up your sleeves and getting in there.
that's very,
It's a
very well said. If I may, I'm curious about, you found out about your son at the age of 6 months, right? Meningitis.
Right.
And that really impacted you and just the
Yes.
journey that you were on at that point. Can you speak a little bit more to that and how that played out, and how, did you get on your knees to pray like, God, uh,
Well, so I was raised Catholic. I went to 10 years of Catholic school. 2 of those years was Catholic high school. And then we bought a house in Long Island. My parents did. And I finished high school in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood. So I had a little bit of a transition there. And so when my son got sick, even though I had that solid background, I was convinced that he got sick because I was just a rabble rouser. I walked away from the church and wasn't doing what I was supposed to do. That is not Catholic teaching, but that is what I believe I heard. Okay, from everyone, my family, everyone around me that was Catholic. You have selective hearing at that age too. And so, but it took me a while to realize that was not the truth coming from the church. And so I spent a long period of time blaming myself for what happened to him. And so that was another reason why I thought, well, let me go back. But I was almost ashamed to go back, which is why the non-denominational church opened a door for me, and I thought, yeah, this will be just as good. This will be fine to go right here. So that's yeah, that's what happened.
very, very honest. It's like, yeah, if
Yeah,
you really dig into it, maybe there's shame in there. And
yeah,
I would say in many respects the same thing happened to me. It's one thing to not know your faith, of course, but there
right,
might be something else going on as well
right,
as to why you wouldn't want to return if you know
right,
that it's so, as you said earlier, the truth, and the truth
right.
hurts. The
Yes,
truth hurts, right?
yes.
So, yeah,
Yeah, and I really, and I like I said, I love the pastors and the people that I met in the non-denominational churches. It was wonderful. But I only felt like I was going so far. And I mentioned this in the book that, we have to realize the world is not flat. It's round. And so don't be afraid to get to the edge because it's not the edge. Just keep going, because God's not going to let you fall off. And so that's what I really felt like was happening when they wouldn't talk about Mary because, they wouldn't just talk about her. I was like, she's the mother of Jesus.
I
Why
know.
aren't we talking about her? It's just, but they wouldn't talk about her, and they wouldn't talk about the Eucharist. It's just a symbol, even though they believe everything else is, you know, whatever it says in the Bible is truth. Well, what happened to John 6? How do you not believe that? So it's just a different, I just know I did a lot of searching, and I found it. I found it back in the Catholic Church. And there's so many people who have done this circle. They've either left and come back, or
So
they
true.
weren't there and they came back. They were real close, and then they just dug in and they came back. It's like, you have to dig in. You can't just sit out there and say, well, my opinion is, and I think, you know, this, and this, but you have no foundation for it. I really
Yeah.
think that that's what God calls the lukewarm. I think that's what frustrated him, was that they weren't willing to dig in and make a commitment and see it through.
Yeah, I think that, in our experience as well, you'd hear about a lot of the we're going to dig deep or unpack this verse or this
Hmm.
book of the Bible.
Hmm.
But it would always be, not always, I shouldn't say that, but a lot of times it seemed in isolation. And when I returned
Hmm.
to the Catholic Church, I mean, all I had to do was go to one mass, and to see
Right.
the old and the new. It was presented in a way that I thought, what the heck? How you can say sola scriptura and
Right.
firmly believe that, but which parts of scripture, and are all things piecemeal, or do you grab other verses when convenient? So I have, just like you, great relationships from that period of time. And
Hmm.
but I think you're absolutely right that um, that's why it's called the fullness of the faith, the
Right.
Catholic faith, because that's when you start to see the communal aspect of everything, the familial aspect of everything, and it all comes together.
Hmm.
Back to your book, I wanted to ask you, how do you take readers on the journey? What is the breakdown of the progression, if you can speak to that?
So the first part of the book is really the history. The first part of the book is focusing on Mary's upbringing, okay, which took me to the apocryphal gospels, which I when I saw that, I thought, all right, these aren't approved. Should I really be digging in here? But then I saw commentary about those apocryphal gospels from St. Augustine, St. Jerome, St. Thomas Aquinas. And I thought, well, I know those guys. I could get in there. So I dug in and learned that. So that's the first part of the book, really looking at some of those gospels and the commentary and the input from a lot of different sources. There's even some pieces in there about the Quran. I really found some really great things. So the first part is about Mary's life.
Yep.
The second part of the book is all those rosaries, all those mysteries put in chronological order, and we just write about each of them. We place ourselves in there. So we're kind of teaching people also how to meditate. You're not just repeating this prayer, because Mary specifically says it's not for repetition. Put this together with a mystery and tell Saint Dominic, preach my Psalter, preach the Ave Maria, preach it. And so put the mystery together with the decade and preach that. So that was the whole point of this. So that's the second part of the book. And you put in, there's a little bit of my history. My child is in there, my children, my husband. My husband passed away 5 years ago. All of that's in there. It's just, you can't do the sorrowful mysteries without really thinking about all the stuff that you've been through too. And you should be able to do that when you're praying that rosary. You should be able to think about what you've been through and relate it to what Jesus has been through, and you can put the connections there. And then you could see how he has gotten you through these things.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Do you also focus on the spiritual fruits or the spiritual gifts of each mystery? Because that was new to me up until maybe a year and a half ago, where I was learning how to at least get to that mental space to picture the agony, to picture the
Hmm.
scourging, et cetera, et cetera. But then the spiritual fruit, what should come from that. Purity should come from this.
Right.
Obedience to the holy will of God should come from. Did you touch on that as well? I'm just curious.
Not in each one of those specifically, but those things are coming out as we look at the research that was being done. We look at the spiritual exercise, placing yourself in there, in the scripture, and just all the way it was written, you're going to get that out of there. But you're not, if we didn't specifically say each of those gifts.
Got it.
Does
No,
that
no,
make
no.
sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And like you said, if you're aligning it with your personal life, because there are clearly in your life, with just briefly what you described, you've had some crosses, much like
Right.
everyone else. If you start to think about what was a trial for you, and then I
Hmm.
think, well, back to my point about spiritual fruit of a mystery. For carrying of the cross, I've heard various spiritual fruits, but one of them is patient bearing of trials.
Yeah.
And I'm,
Just, I struggle with that. I really see patience is not something yeah. And you know what? I always struggle with, why do we have to spend Tuesday and Friday saying the sorrowful mysteries? Why can't we just go right into the glorious mysteries on 3 days a week? I mean, why can't we do something different instead? But there is a connection to what we went through and what God went through, and so that's important. But there are the other mysteries. There's the joyful mysteries, and that starts it all. And the Bridgetine Rosary is the only rosary that starts with the Immaculate Conception, which is really the beginning. The other rosaries don't start that way. So you have to look at all of them together as you walk through, because then you'll be able to understand the glorious mystery that ends with the Assumption and the Coronation.
yeah.
And Protestants say, well, that's not scriptural, but it is. When you do all this research and you see all this, it is. And so that's what I'm hoping that they'll see.
No, that's well done. So how are you marketing that? If you do want some of the Protestant audience to fathom the church's teaching, historic teaching, how do you have plans to reach some of
Yes,
them?
the plans are it's like a work in progress here. We're making them. I'm part of Facebook groups. I'm connected to the Catholic Writers Guild for one thing, and I have just put my book in for a couple of awards with the Catholic Media Association and some other non-Catholic organizations. I've joined some Facebook groups that are not Catholic as well as Catholic to kind of push out there. It's difficult, um, but I think the cover. I want to see the cover. If the cover will do, entice people to pick it up and read it.
Good for you.
Don't have a plan right now. Like I said, it
Yeah.
evolves every day. Something adds to it. So that's what
Yeah.
we're doing. Do you have a
No,
suggestion? Because I'm open.
no, no, no. We should talk about it. I just think that a big some people that have not gone to a non-denominational church, especially Catholics, may not understand what it's like to be in the shoes of a Protestant. I think that was a grace in a roundabout way. We have
Yes,
no idea. We say, what, I made mistakes and I was lost. Yeah, but God was doing something
right,
through that. So I think that I'm able to, at least we think we can, get in the shoes of the Protestants. And so
right.
when we were in that circle, one of the things that I heard was this idea of, when you hear Mary or you hear Rosary, you don't think intercession. You
Right,
think it's a completely different thing, and you throw out words that you read from the Old Testament that have nothing to do with
right,
intercession, like
right,
necromancy and all this other stuff
right,
and
right, right.
divination. And anyway, but what I think is important, and I know there are a lot of apologists that are doing this right now, is to continually reinforce the aspect of intercession
Mm-hmm,
at the same time contemplating Christ, contemplating the Holy Family,
mm-hmm,
contemplating these things. And I hope and I pray that type of language will over time continually help Protestants understand what this is,
mm-hmm.
intercessory, and how the there is a cloud of witnesses. And it's
Right.
not just, your friend on earth that is praying for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think there's a strong fear, and the only way you can get over fear is by moving. You have to move in it. I was afraid to publish the book. I thought, who are you to write this book? And I left it, and I realized God does not want me to live in fear. I've got to take it off the shelf and do something with it. And then I had to think about, well, where am I going to do with it? And then I thought of my friend, so you've got to do something if you're afraid. And I think a lot of what it's not just Protestants, Catholics too. I mean, a lot of the Catholics are praying the Rosary, they're just saying words and they don't really get it. I mean, I've met a lot of Catholics who went through CCD but did not go to Catholic school, and the Rosary is important to them, but they really don't know how to do it. They really don't know how to do it or say it or understand it, or they fall asleep with it, which is how you start out, but you got to keep going, kind of. So yeah, I think this book's going to help everybody.
I love it. I love it. You absolutely nailed it. What you described, I would bet 95% of people deal with. Who am I? Why?
Yeah.
And you start to think negative thoughts about yourself and your abilities and all this other
Right.
garbage.
Right.
And then you put it out there. And I can say, in my case, you put it out there and then you say, why did I put it out there? I was not,
Yeah. I guess like, oh God, you got to pray
exactly.
as you go, and I'm praying as I go, and I'm like, okay, Lord, I'm writing this book about your mother. Okay, I'm writing about your mother.
Well,
Yeah,
excellent, excellent. Oh, I want to thank you so much for your yes. That is a nice parallel. Mary said yes, you said yes to write a book and put it out there. Phenomenal reviews. I have to say that as well. And your testimony, a lot of people can relate to that. I think I'm going to go to this church on the corner, or, a lot of people are talking about this church over here. I think I need to check it out and then return home for the Eucharist.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Well, God bless you. Thank you again
Thank you.
for this time. And everyone, please share, buy the book, comment, like, subscribe. And until next time, take care and God bless.